There we are. Got it. Point of order, ladies and gentlemen. We are not having any blue cards. This is a denial of democracy. They are trying to close down debate. They don't want debate. The establishment are trying to stop us having our say. This Parliament is not democratic. It's a farce.
Reprenons le débat.
Let's go back to the debate.
I can't believe that the Conservative Party, after all the years of wrangling over the EU, is now caving into Brussels. Why are we letting the odious Guy Verhofstadt dictate terms? He's only interested in one thing, and that's himself. As the EU moves to a United States of Europe, we should be looking to our oldest friend, our ally, United States of America. I was in Washington last week, and I spoke personally to Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of State for Trade, who said to me, "Don't take the poison pill that Brussels will offer you if you want to deal with us." And I agree with him. And then he said, "Otherwise they'll send in the EU army." And he thought he was joking. I said, "That will probably happen." Yes, and there is clapping in there for that, yeah, against the Democrats. At a time when we should be valuing our friendship with the US above all friendships, you're taking the poison pill. Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, instead of looking forward to a low-tax, low-regulation economy, co-signed a letter with other EU finance ministers to denounce Mr. Trump's tax reforms. How dare he? As a Remainer, he is totally trying to sabotage a US deal. A few years ago, in a few years' time, over 90% of world trade will be outside of the EU. Why is Mrs May shackling us to this failing bloc? Yes, business does need certainty, and that's why we should just walk away and move to WTO rules. Voters want an end to immigration. This deal doesn't do it. Voters want an end to the jurisdiction of the ECJ. But Mrs May has signalled another 8 years. This is unacceptable. Let's walk away. Thank you for your time, Monsieur Barnier, but it ain't working.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith, is this a point of order? Because we're not having blue cards. It's a point of order, is it?
Micro.
Could you turn your microphone on?
Well, merci bien. Colleagues, we're used to Mrs Atkinson's nonsense, but she really has crossed the line this afternoon, this morning. She referred to Mr Verhofstadt, our negotiator, as odious. I see she's nodding, so I would urge you, Madam, to apologise for that and retract that comment. Mr Verhofstadt is not of my political family, he's not of my political group, but your comments today are way beyond the line. We are used to your nonsense, but personal abuse has no place in this chamber. I urge you to retract that comment.
Nous allons reprendre dans la...
We'll move on in our debate. Mrs Atkinson.
Il n'y a pas de blue card.
We don't have any blue cards.
Vous n'avez pas le micro de toute façon.
You haven't been given the floor, so there's no real point.
Donc, comme ça ne sert à rien, je passe la parole à Madame...
So I'll give the floor to Miss James.
Madame James, vous avez 1 minute.
1 minute.
Madam Chairman, well, how do I follow that, quite frankly, but I'm going to try. Now, the EU objectives throughout the negotiations have been very clear. One, make the United Kingdom look as weak as possible internationally, and secondly, extract as much money as you possibly can from us. So, Mr Barnier, you've done a very good job. You certainly achieved that, and I take no pleasure in giving you that compliment. There's been gloating in the chamber this morning. There's also been lots of, quite frankly, misleading statements. But I'm going to ignore those, and I'm going to point out that the European Union would not be where it is now, but for the United Kingdom joining in 1973 and contributing to the finance and international presence that you now have. So stop moaning about it and give us some, if you don't mind, recognition for what we've contributed. But the big fudge this morning, the stuff that you don't want to hear, the emperor's new clothes, if you like, is the fact that the migration story is not a positive one. The economic mess, quite frankly, that is still there in the background in terms of the European Union hasn't gone away. So please wake up, take a reality check and stop just focusing on Brexit in this chamber and get on with doing the job you're elected to do.
Mr Smith, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. I will be supporting the resolution this afternoon in the votes, and I do so with a sense of real sadness and not a little anger, both personally on behalf of the people that I represent. Scotland did not want this. Scotland voted against this. This is not in Scotland's name. But we do need, and I say it through gritted teeth, to move on to phase 2 of the negotiations, Because for too many people in the UK, Brexit remains white noise, a false equivalence aided by an industrial-scale spin machine telling us that somehow we will have our cake and eat it, it'll be all right and on the night because we're special, we're British. People need to see the detail, the line by line, the policy by policy, the nitty-gritty. People need to see what they're going to lose for Brexit to become real. And in phase 2, the promises of the shysters and charlatans who have so disgraced themselves in the conduct even today in this debate will be shown as what they are. A cruel deception on the people they claim to serve. This is the end of the beginning of this Brexit negotiation. I look forward to phase 2 where we'll hold them to account. Thank you.
Mr. Coburn, go ahead.
Mr. Smith is not being factual. 40% of Scots voted against the European Union. That's a substantial minority, of which I represent. He is misleading the House by suggesting that Scots do not want to be in Britain or do not want to leave the European Union. That is absolute travesty.
Mr. Farage.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever heard so little criticism of the United Kingdom in this chamber in all my life. And I guess that doesn't really take much working out, does it? Monsieur Barnier said earlier that there were key areas upon which he wasn't prepared to make many concessions. Well, you didn't need to, sir, because you were up against Theresa May, and she was all for making as many concessions as she possibly could, including agreeing a ludicrous bill of up to 40 billion sterling for us to have the right to leave, a continued role for the European Court of Justice, and in line with that, family reunions that mean, frankly, open-door immigration from the European Union is going to continue for years to come, and almost bizarrely, a commitment for ongoing regulatory alignment. It's as if, even though we're leaving, effectively the British government wants to keep us in some form of single market relationship. So I'm not surprised you're all very pleased with her. Theresa the Appeaser has given in on virtually everything. But as an observation in an exercise of power, it's fascinating. Whether we like or dislike the European Union, we can't deny the power that it's got. Because you managed to make a British Prime Minister leave Downing Street in the middle of the night, fly to Brussels, to go and forge an agreement with unelected bureaucrats based in Brussels. I mean, it's a form of ritual humiliation which she was prepared to put herself through. She has danced to your tune all the way through this. You must be very, very pleased indeed. And now we enter into what perhaps may be the biggest deception yet played on the British public. She is seeking a transition phase. And there are one or two comments here about whether the Brits will get that phase. Well, of course they will, because we're volunteering to go on paying the membership fee, to accepting all the existing rules, all the new rules. We will effectively, once transition is granted, have left the European Union at the end of March 2019 in name only. And if that transition phase lasts up until the next general election, there is a real possibility that a new incoming British government stroke coalition could sign us up to the single market and the customs union forever. So I do understand why many in this place feel encouraged by the performance of our Prime Minister, and I can assure you increasingly millions who voted for Brexit are feeling frustrated, perhaps even now moving to the point of anger. It's the same story across the whole of the West. The aspirations of the people and the aspirations of our political leaders and class are in a very, very different place. I fear Brexit, at some point in the future, may need to be refought all over again.
For the group of the Europe of Nations and Freedom, Mr. de Graaff.
President, with regard to Brexit, I stress the sovereignty of the UK. And this implies no jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, no restrictions on free trade agreements, application of UK law with regard to EU citizens, and that are to us the central elements of any acceptable deal. Having said that, migration is again an important topic of the European Council meeting, and rightly so. Mass migration still threatens the survival of our civilization, of our security, of our culture. And these illiterate illegal fortune seekers believe in the barbarism of Sharia, of Hadith and Quran. They come to the EU and still come with hundreds of thousands to benefit from our prosperity, and they do not contribute a single bit to our societies. They take without giving, and if necessary, by force. This has to stop. So I praise the governments of the Visegrad countries who stand for their own traditions, for their people and culture, and they lead the resistance against Juncker and Timmermans. They are the ones guiding Europe. Now, this is how you deal with illegal migrants. And first, no admission. And next, no incentives. And that is no housing, no social benefits, no family reunion, and no endless legal procedures. I also praise the courageous Libyan Coast Guard who set sail against aggressive human traffickers and rogue NGOs while risking their own lives. The Coast Guard of a country that was destroyed by France, the EU and the US now protects EU borders. The EU cannot show more clearly that it's utterly bankrupt. Schengen has to end now, and national borders must close now. Finally, the migrants who are already here must be returned straight away. Do not tolerate them. Do not pay them off. Do not send them back, but round them up and bring them back. So listen, Mr. Juncker and Timmermans, this is how you do it.
La parole est maintenant à Monsieur Batten pour 1 minute.
Mr. Batten now for 1 minute.
Thank you. Now, on the 23rd of June 2016, the British people voted by a clear majority to leave the European Union. That decision was not conditional on any withdrawal agreement or any other factor. 18 months later, we still haven't left, and the leaving process is in a shambles. Mrs May is a Remainer. She leads a party and a parliament that sadly is made up of a majority of Remainers. They simply do not want to leave. Now, what Mrs May and the European Union intends is one of two outcomes: either to achieve a deal whereby we leave in name but not in reality, or to delay the whole leaving process until the next general election, when the referendum result can be set aside. Either way, the result of the referendum is being betrayed. Her Majesty's government should not be asking the European Union how it can leave. It should be telling the European Union how it is going to leave. Now, it will never be too late for a patriotic government and parliament to take control and make Brexit happen.
La parole est à
The floor now to Mr. Annemans for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to turn to my British colleagues because, regardless of how Brexit goes, there's an interesting psychological phenomenon that we're seeing here in this chamber. Of those who will remain in the EU, there seems to be a tendency towards acceleration. And the pro-EU, the EU federalists, they are now tearing at a hectic pace forwards. Mr. Bellet, our good colleague here from the EPP group, said in a TV programme last week, "I'm pleased that they're leaving because they were a pain in the arse anyway," unquote. And of course that makes it very clear why people like Schulz, Macron, others are really got their foot on the pedal. We have to understand, friends, those who are staying, who are critics of the EU, we're going to miss them. I wish them all the best, but we will miss them.
La parole est à Monsieur.
The floor now to Mr. O'Flynn for 1 minute.
Thank you. In my country, Manchester United fans still talk about the holy trinity of best law and Charlton. In the EU, we have the rather less holy trinity of Juncker, Schulz and Verhofstadt, each supporting the creation of a federal superstate. Mr. Verhofstadt believes the nations of Europe are dwarves that cannot prosper independently. In his State of the Union speech, Mr. Juncker unveiled a raft of new integrationist plans, and Mr. Schulz left this place to go around Germany stirring up apathy about a United States of Europe. If that's what you want, then fair enough, but do not affect to be surprised that the British people won't go there. Even a moment's reflection on our history and indeed our geography should tell you that. So you should let us leave the EU with goodwill. Instead, many of you seek to punish us, and it is that spirit of pettiness that will, in the end, destroy all your grand plans.
Yeah. Well said.
Hang on a minute.
Monsieur Woolfe, pour une...
Mr. Woolfe, 1 minute.
Madam President, 537 days ago, the majority of British people voted to leave the EU. But for 537 days, we have listened to a rump of Remainers moan, whinge and cry about losing their beloved EU. For 537 days, we've watched a cabal of political elitists wage an anti-democratic campaign in the UK to delay, damage and deny Brexit. But at Christmas time, we are reminded that 3 wise men brought gifts to Jesus for a brighter future. And in that spirit, I offer 3 gifts to those Remainers in this chamber and beyond. The gifts of hearing, hope and a heart. Hearing so that the voice of those people who believe leaving the EU will make their lives better, brighter and freer is at long last heard by you. Hope that someday you accept the result and start to move on. And finally, a heart, because to those you have abused by calling old, stupid and ignorant for voting to leave, believe you do not have one. Happy Christmas and a joyous Brexit New Year.
La parole est